The Nativity Gospel readings references of Christ's birth as a fulfillment of a prophecy. Can you talk about Matthew, the Nativity account, emphasis on the fulfillment
Yes.
of the Old Testament prophecies and how we can understand them in this significance from an Orthodox perspective?
Well, that's a very important part of Matthew's gospel. He quotes from what we call the Old Testament, what they was just the scriptures for them. There was no New Testament, of course, when the evangelists were writing. So when they were quoting from the Jewish scriptures, those were the only scriptures they had. And he quotes from them twice as much as all the other evangelists, the other three, I should say, combined. And this shows us how important the prophets were, especially to Matthew. All of the evangelists quote the prophets because it was very important in the early church that the church demonstrate that Jesus Christ fulfilled the prophecies. But Matthew emphasizes that far more than the others. And in the nativity part of Matthew's gospel, which is chapters 1 and 2, he quotes 5 separate prophecies about the birth of Christ. And he introduces them usually with this kind of formula, something like, thus was fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet. And so he's really emphasizing the idea of fulfillment. And that's a big theme in his gospel too, that Christ fulfills the prophecies, because Matthew was writing for a Jewish audience.
Right.
And so he deals with a lot of Jewish themes, but mainly, if you think about it, it makes sense. How are you going to prove to Jews that Jesus is the Messiah? There's only one way to show that he fulfilled the prophecies, and that's why it is so emphasized in Matthew's gospel. The Orthodox Church, being a direct continuation of the ancient church, continues to hold the prophets in very high esteem for that reason. So very often when we go into an Orthodox church, most Orthodox churches will have a dome in which Christ is looking down from above. We call that icon the Pantocrator. And then very often around or beneath Christ in the dome are the prophets. And that's because they were supporting the fact that Jesus Christ is in fact the Messiah, because you can't deny the fulfillment of the prophecies that we see. And there were many, many prophecies in the ancient church that Christ fulfilled. And I want to bring out something else that I think we don't appreciate today. The early Christians could prove that Jesus was the Messiah from the Old Testament, from the Jewish scriptures alone, because that was their scriptures too. They didn't have any other scriptures. They didn't turn to the Gospels the way we do. They read the Old Testament, and then they knew of so many prophecies about the Lord that were fulfilled by Christ, and they couldn't be faked. You can't fake your birth. You can't fake, especially all the miracles of Christ. And all the Jews knew the prophecies of the Messiah. They knew which prophecies were messianic, and that was very deliberate on the part of God to let them know what to expect. Otherwise, how would they know who the Messiah was? And that point was made by St. John Chrysostom. God allowed these messianic prophecies that were made hundreds of years before Christ, so that the Jewish people would know the Messiah when he came. So sometimes people think, but the Jews didn't believe in Jesus, but that's not true, because all of the first followers of Jesus were Jews.